All right. Hey guys, welcome back to Soul Recovery Podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Keehan.
And I'm Gail Darkall.
And we're excited today to enter into our episode.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. You know, it's funny. Obviously, we have some new friends here with us, and one of the things that I think is little background characters. One of the things that I know I work with a lot, and I know you bring into your work quite often, is looking at the sensory, individual sensory profiles, and how important it is for us to create a sensory environment that is soothing for our nervous system.
Oh, so true.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tell us, what comes to your mind, Ken, when you're thinking of the sensory present grounding and how that helps somebody kind of integrate new information?
Okay, well, I think we touched on this last episode, but we were talking about state-dependent memory learning.
Yes.
And how when you're looking around a room and you're in a space like your home or a friend's house or something like that, if you have a lot of memories there, your brain is going to be scanning the areas and looking at like furniture and things on the walls and decorative art. And anything that the brain is looking at, it's registering and remembering, especially if there are high levels of emotion associated with those experiences, right? Because the hippocampus is going to save and encode and store those memories. And so when we think about state-dependent memory learning, if you've been through something traumatic or an overwhelming life experience,
Right.
and let's say it happened in the home or at a friend's home that you frequently visit, if you're in those spaces, it's really important to be mindful of how you can allow your brain to create new maps and new information. And one of those ways is by shifting around the room, right? And so with state-dependent memory learning, it really is about the associations that we're seeing repeatedly. So when we flip the room around, when we change the space, we don't have the same associations. So the brain says, oh, this is a new novelty experience.
Right.
And it's not getting the same feedback. And so therefore change is a lot more easy, right, for the individual to experience.
So we might see less maybe of a trauma response, heightened arousal.
Yes.
And one of the other things that I'm thinking is, how do we transition? Because I think this is a really beautiful analogy of the home and the spaces. But I think so much of us as humans, we're so relational that I do see this quite often coming up with reading people, like reading people's facial experiences, their affect, right? And how maybe specific individuals have cued facial expressions with danger or with
a threat.
And that, you know what, that's such a great way to describe it, because I think threat encompasses so much for so many different individuals.
Absolutely. So when we look at that and kind of break it down, we're looking at what is the brain primed to do in situations. If we go back and look at like early life experiences, Dr. Frank Anderson talks a lot about early life experiences and reframing the word trauma into overwhelming life experience. And I love how he does this, because we've all can relate to that. We all have had some overwhelming life experience at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
And so when we think about our brain and how those overwhelming life experiences wire us, in people who have experienced situations growing up where they were the primary regulator, right, for a dysregulated parent, caretaker, or any authority figure, really. And we can kind of look at this from the lens of religious trauma, like within a church setting, any type of authority. The person is going to have a loop that they're in, and that loop is assess for danger, collect information, analyze people's faces for subtle changes in tone of voice, right? In the way that they're presenting. And for these people, their brain is constantly scanning for those threats, right? So there is really not a lot of rest. And so if you think about the brain constantly collecting information and scanning, it's really the opposite of grounding, right? And being present in a space. Right. And so talk about how that is when you work with your clients on grounding and somatic work, and which you're so incredible at. Talk about, how do you do that with a client?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's getting an idea of what each individual sensory profile is, right? So we have some individuals that are more aversive or have a hypersensitivity to sound, to lighting, to certain textures, also visual stimuli, right? So I think a lot of individuals may not recognize it, but what they do notice is maybe the racing thoughts or feeling really overwhelmed. And so I always go back to 3 different potential triggers. One you should always be assessing for is my sensory system overwhelmed? Or is my sensory system maybe underwhelmed? So do I need to potentially upregulate my system because there's maybe not enough stimuli around me for my sensory profile to be on and engaged? Or is it overwhelmed and I need something to kind of soothe myself and bring my mind and my body back into the room a little bit?
To downregulate.
To downregulate.
Right? I love how you're putting those into perspective, because we've heard about, a lot of us in the field, I've heard about downregulation. Right? Because that's where we're going back and grounding ourselves. But this upregulation is something that maybe not a lot of us are familiar about.
Well, if you ever look at my desk, I am constantly in an upregulated or downregulated. I like to keep a lot of those options. And so for me to upregulate myself, anything with like citric acid, so anything that really like gives me that that really kind of wakes up
that lemon
my
zest.
Sensory system, the lemon, right? It can be so many different things. I also have like a diffuser, so lemongrass is also very upregulating for my sensory profile. It kind of wakes me up. Mint is also.
I was just thinking about mint.
Yeah. So all of those things are really helpful. I often have, and I'm kind of like visually seeing it right now, I will have 3 drinks at my disposal, almost where, if I'm in sessions usually, because I'm traversing the world that my client is painting with them, and my sensory profile is engaging with that. So I'm kind of dancing with them in their reality, and so I always have to keep mine grounded. And so I might have hot tea, a cold drink, and something that case in point over here, I want to have tea. I usually have a cup of hot tea in my hands wherever I go, because it keeps me anchored. And I think that word really resonates with my nervous system, is I have to stay anchored. So it really just depends on what that looks like for me.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like when we think about sensory and how powerful it is, right? With candles and tea and anything that's going to bring that brain into a space of calm. And you're really just giving signals to your brain that disconfirm the incoming fear signals from the past, right? And so the hippocampus stores those memories associated with high levels of emotion, which we think about overwhelming life events, as Dr. Frank Anderson puts it. And when we have those sensory experiences and our brain is overwhelmed with lots of emotional experiences, we're kind of competing with that and the tea and the candles,
new information that our system is taking in.
Exactly. And so when we think about like meditation and mindfulness and being grounded and down regulation, for some people it is a struggle. They are on the struggle bus, right? Like it is a very challenging thing. And people say like, oh, you should just just meditate, just sit there and turn off your mind. Well, if
Good
you're
luck.
a trauma survivor and you've had a lot of overwhelming life experiences,
Right.
good luck.
Right.
Exactly. Because you're not going to be able to really just turn off your mind. You're going to have your brain is actually going to go into a space of hyper vigilance and hyper arousal. And in the silence, right, that is when our brain starts scanning for those threats.
Right. Right.
Because silence is unpredictability. We don't know. We're not getting a lot of feedback. We're not getting a lot of information. And so when we think about the process of deconstructing and pulling apart the old identity, the identity that was rooted in scanning and collecting data and analyzing, it's really bringing your brain into a space of calm and rest. And you might say, oh, well, that sounds good in theory, but like when I actually try to do it, it's really challenging. And so this is why it's that repetition, slowly, right? We talked about neural pathways last episode, and you're slowly building new neural pathways and pulling the other ones apart. And we do this through that repetitive process of showing the brain, okay, I'm in environment B now. I was in environment A before. Yeah. And now in environment B, there's no longer a threat. And so one thing I want to cover in this episode, which I think has, been really important and has come up quite frequently with clients, is this idea of guilt and shame. Yeah. And I want to talk about the role of that, because when we think about guilt and shame, we're actually not looking at guilt and shame as much as we think we are. What we're looking at is the brain auto-correcting back into a pattern of behavior within milliseconds when we deviate from the pattern that kept us safe and alive. Right? And so when someone says, oh my God, I just had this experience with somebody, and let's say they really offended me because I tried to put up a boundary and they pushed back on the boundary. And when they pushed back on the boundary, my brain gave me the message that was like, oh, Kian, you should have been more nice. You should have, taken care of their emotions. You should have put them first. And now you're being selfish, right? And then you feel the guilt. That's really just the brain auto-correcting back to the original framework, which was, don't put your needs above the other person. Make sure you regulate them and ground yourself in that safety.
It's so well put. I want to crawl into so many of those spaces that that you brought in. And I want to start with the neural pathway and kind of bring in this idea of the guilt and how, we're talking, about breaking those neural pathways. And the way I see it, and I was kind of bringing in this idea, the analogy of a freeway. And so it's almost like, when you're driving to work, now maybe this was pre-COVID for some of you, we might have some hybrid models that we're working within in our work structure, but most of us have a route to specific places, right? I'm going to take either this highway or I'm going to take this street, and we might have 3 or 4 different alternative routes that we have used to get to that place. And so I think it's really important for us to really look at those neural pathways, like that route that you have always taken, maybe where you don't need to use your Apple Maps or your Google Maps or your Waze, but you still do just because you keep an eye on the time, you know?
Right.
But it's similar to what we're talking about when we're talking about the neural pathways of relationships. And so when you start to take, it's essentially like taking an alternative route, but without Google Maps, without Apple Maps, and without Waze. And so your brain is coming up with a whole new orientation for the landscape, right?
Such a great analogy.
Oh,
here on
there's
this.
the Starbucks over there. Okay, I need to remember that because that's something, and I need a marker, a mile marker to know where I turn over here. When we think about guilt, I think about that course correction that you're bringing in, and it's like, oh shoot, should I even be on this route? I'm just going to go to Google. I know Google. I know Apple will tell me right away.
It's reliable because I've had it for so long.
Yes. So it's almost like this protective strategy that's like, wait a minute, are you sure you know what you're doing? I don't know if this is the right path for you. I don't know if it's going to work. What do you think about that?
So well explained. Because I think about going back to the 405 or the 5.
Yeah. I was really pushing the highways last week.
It's such a good way of breaking it down because, we can all relate to that feeling of getting in the car and driving. And sometimes you just completely forget where you're going. You're just like, oh, I'm going to the gym or I'm going to the store. And you've been going there for so long, your brain just kind of...
It's rote memory.
And we can see dissociation here, right? Where... And not all of those experiences are bad or should be corrected. Sometimes when we're on the road, we're not going to be thinking about where we're going. We're going to be focusing on, avoiding danger.
Right. Or thinking about what happened that day.
Exactly. Or going through, oh man, that meeting at work was so tough, and oh, maybe this person thought that or this. But when we think about the rerouting of the pathways, it does take conscious awareness to know where to turn.
Yes.
When I talk to my clients about the brain, right, we're really looking at, this is not your personality.
Yes.
This is, the brain is separate from your personality. This is not your identity. This is your brain. Your brain is concerned with keeping you safe, right?
Yes. Staying away from threat.
Exactly. That is its primary focus, and obviously there's all the other things, but when we look at maybe why it's so hard to reroute and change is because your brain is saying, I'm trying to save you, I'm trying to keep you safe, right? And I don't want you to do these things, because if we go back to more of the primitive parts of the brain, that's its job. And so when I'm working with clients, I'm really looking at using different language when you're talking about your recovery. If you're in soul recovery, right? You're doing these things. You're not going to say, I have this problem, right? And name this problem as yours, like it belongs to you. You're going to say, my brain is trying to protect me from threats that are no longer there. You are essentially calling out what is happening, right? And you're using that language to redirect and take a different route on the freeway.
Absolutely. I love where we're going with this, because I think depersonalizing this behavior that so many of us have attributed to ourselves, our identity, to our personhood, is really difficult to do, because sometimes it feels like we're extricating a part of self. And
yes,
it's funny, I was just talking to some individuals about this, and we talked about if your thoughts had a personality, what would the personality be? And I really love some of the responses. One of the responses was Tony Soprano. And I think of Tony Soprano and I think of like the intensity, right?
Yes.
That is being brought into that internal space. And I really think it's important to playfully engage with that, because therapy, coaching, healing, let's just bring it down to just like basic human healing.
Yes.
It's serious, right? And it absolutely is, but I think the more playfully we can engage with it, the more we're going to not enact with the defense mechanisms. And that's what we're kind of talking about, is we're having this internal conflict. There's a part of us that is saying, I want change and I know it's going to be better for me. And then we're in direct conflict with the brain saying, but that equates to threat, right? So it's pain over fear threshold.
Yes, and finding that balance. And I think it makes me think about, like, the brain is almost like a little child, right? That you're taking care of.
Yeah, I love this. Yeah.
And if we think about it that way, right? It's like, oh, it's throwing a temper tantrum, right? Yeah. It's not getting its way. It used to be people pleasing, and now when the person engages in those behaviors, it says, oh, you're safe. You're in a predictable space, right? We got this. We know this pattern. We know this dance. I know how to salsa. I know how to Viennese waltz.
Yes.
I know how to tango, right? And it's just going into that pattern over and over and over again.
Right.
And then when we reroute, it's like, whoa, I have no idea what this is.
I don't know the moves.
Don't know the moves.
The choreography to this.
Have no idea what to do. And so our job is to really almost treat our brain like a child, right? This is like our child that we're showing it's going to be okay. You are safe, right? We don't need to scan for threats anymore. We don't need to be hypervigilant. You're not in the same environment. You're in environment B now. Environment A had a bear, right?
Yes. Back to the bear.
But now you're in environment B.
Yeah.
And there is no threat there.
Yes.
Right? And so it's constantly holding your brain's hand and saying, it's okay, we're going a different path and you're gonna survive. You're gonna get out of it. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah. That's so difficult to do when we're really crawling into, I think, the trenches of change, right? And when we think about change, I think of Prochaska's stages of change, and we have pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action, maintenance. And the pre-contemplation is that stage where we don't really think it's a problem because it's still safe. It's still telling your brain's safety mechanisms are still helping, are still registering in your mind that it's safe, it's good, it's not maladaptive, it's not doing anything negative in my world. Contemplation is really what we're talking about. When somebody's in the contemplation stage of change, it's creating this level of ambivalence, because the thing that you're telling me that I need to do, I want to do so bad, but that's a lot of work. Like that, I feel like I would have to change so much of my world. And I often see this when we're working in recovery. And let's be real, so many of us are in recovery. That's the name of our podcast, Soul Recovery.
Soul Recovery.
What are you recovering from? What's the innate process that your brain brought into your world to self-soothe, regulate, upregulate, downregulate, mute, suppress, whatever that was? So I think it's really important for us to think about, when we are trying to change, we're actually letting go of something that has been a huge piece of our survival. And that is no small feat.
Oh, it's not just taking a different turn. It's like removing everything that was the identity, the previous identity.
Yes.
And when we take that identity away, if that's all that the identity was, we're left with nothingness and a void. We're left with something
Who am I?
that feels very overwhelming, right? And it's almost like a tapestry, and all the threads in the tapestry have been the ways that this person regulated another person, the ways that they stayed safe, right? But all their identity, everything that they did, most of the things in their life were related to emotional fusion with another person.
Or if we speak to the other group of individuals, maybe it's the distancing.
Exactly.
So we have the fusion, we have the distancing.
Both sides, yeah.
Maybe we have the disorganized individual, right? And obviously this is only 3 categories, and we know that there's such a spectrum. And so everyone is going to find their state of resonance with this. But that, if that's my strategy in relationships, it's also my strategy within myself.
Yes, and it's the chemical strategy too. If we look at the chemical situation, in people that have learned emotional fusion, they are able to get a dopamine hit from managing crisis, from regulating conflict, right? From bringing someone who's dysregulated and putting them back into a state of regulation, taking somebody who's avoidant and bringing them close, showing them that they can be safe, almost like a corrective experience, right? But projecting this outward.
That is such a good point. It essentially is a corrective experience. And I'll speak for me. I know personally that was a really big realization that I had, and it was still in my earlier years of providing therapy and in my own personal therapy, in recognizing, wow, I'm giving to my clients what I need to be giving to myself. And like, shocker, right? But that was a big realization, because I was providing a corrective experience to them, which they represented some form of Gail. They represented some part of self.
Right.
And so, it's funny, I was actually just talking to my sister and we were talking about unconscious mechanisms and how we find the fields that we work in and what that looks like, and how you might find yourself engaging in secondhand trauma because you are used to these high, intense crisis situations in which you're helping regulate, problem solve, because your nervous system has been wired to stay engaged, where another person's nervous system would completely shut down.
So true, right? And then because it's wired to stay engaged, that is how it learned to get dopamine, right? And trying to get the dopamine it's the reward, right? And so if a person has no identity outside of regulating crisis or fusing emotionally with somebody else to stabilize them, they're not going to get their dopamine supply. They're not going to get their hit, right? And they may have trouble existing in a way that doesn't engage in those practices,
right?
Because that is how they learn to live. That's how they learn to survive. And when you take that away, there is a withdrawal process, right? There is the feeling of going into a depression, going into sadness, having that chemical withdrawal because you're not getting the dopamine anymore. So part of unlearning those behaviors and those patterns is also going through this withdrawal and learning how to reorient yourself while you're going through that process.
And to just really lean into what you're talking about, I think of the individual or the individuals that are getting out of a for a better a poor way to explain this is like a toxic relationship, right? Like, put very simply, a toxic relationship. After getting out of that relationship, your nervous system is recalibrating. Because when we think about the abuse cycle, or we think about the high emotionality or volatility, the nervous system has gotten used to that pattern, right? And so we are really made up of just patterns. I know that sounds like almost too simple, but so much of our jobs is to help individuals to just, again, what I think is, what's your sensory profile and what are your patterns? What are your patterns? Because your patterns will tell us so much about what the threats are. And then that will also tell us so much about where you need to find your freedom.
And how accessible it is to recognize that there are unconscious patterns. And if we can analyze those patterns and recognize what's happening, not spend so much time in it, but get enough of an understanding to then pull back and have a bird's eye view of the self, we can really look at, how do I separate my identity from the patterns that my nervous system and my brain is engaging in? And then from there, we get the authentic self.
Yes, that is so. I think this is where we could infuse some playfulness, because I think it's really important for us.
Absolutely.
Right, we need the playful. And one of the things that I think about too is, I think about 12-step recovery. One of the things that 12-step recovery does really well is they help create an infrastructure for change. You get a new community, you get scaffolding and structure, you get a position to hold within the community, if that's like treasurer or a sponsee or a sponsor. And so much of what we're talking about is, how do you recreate your own infrastructure of change when it's all you've ever known? And so I think it's really important. I'm not saying you have to go into a recovery group for any of that, but I think it really is, where can I plug myself in so that I can get feedback? So just to bring this example back, because I think it really does paint a picture, is if I'm putting myself in a recovery group where I'm getting all this feedback that I am doing this good, I am a person that gives good advice, or that shows up and that is responsible, that's creating a new feedback loop to help me self-actualize. Who am I really? What is my identity? And so I think that that's something that we can do in so many different ways, in terms of how activities, if that's joining a tennis club, or if that's
Mm-hmm.
a pottery club, how can we put ourselves in positions where we can get new feedback, new safe feedback for the brain to say, oh, this is different. Oh, I'm different. Oh, people see that I'm different. Now I
Yes.
can see that I'm different. That's the new dopamine hit.
Exactly.
That's the new dopamine.
I'm getting new dopamine from novelty experiences, from things
Yes.
that are outside of the pattern.
Yes.
And my brain is learning I can get that feel good experience outside of regulating someone else, grounding myself, getting the dopamine, and then feeling safe. Right? That's a highly addictive process that millions of people are engaged in.
Yes.
And to learn to go outside of that framework, it requires massive upheaval and change.
Yes.
And that is what we really aim to do on the Soul Recovery Podcast, is help those in this recovery process, because just like any other form of recovery,
yes,
there is a lot of healing that can happen when we are in a collective space.
Yeah.
Right? Individual healing is very important, and so is healing through community. Healing through community can be a game changer for people that feel isolated in this process.
Yes. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's what I see so much come up with my clients, is when we track it back, right? And if we're looking at the relationship they're wanting to get out of, or the relationship pattern that they're becoming aware of, or the substance that they're trying to create a new relationship with, so much of it, if we track it back and track it back and track it back, and we see what was it providing, because clearly it was doing something for you. I see so often it's belonging, it's security, it's connection, it's a sense of self. And so it is, how do I find the proper communities? How do I find those people that feel safe? And I think the thing that we have to really think about, safety versus familiarity. Can you tell me, Leah, what comes to your mind, or how do you work with clients?
I think about so safety and familiarity is really important. I think about the hippocampus, right? And how it stores memories. And sometimes it's our job to let our hippocampus know that it's blurring the past and the present, right? Because there is the ability for change.
Yes.
People have been in many patterns, and I've worked with a number of individuals who feel like this is my pattern, this is my way of life, this is what I do. And then they're able to make massive changes and shift and change the system.
Right.
And so when we think about those changes, we're really looking at taking back control of the brain, getting that community together, right? We do not heal in isolation. I know this is a quote. I don't know who said it, but
I feel like it was Gabor Mate talks about healing in isolation through so much. No, don't quote me on that, but
but yes. So really, we're really looking at how does community help us heal, and I think this is something we can dive into in more detail next episode. As we wrap up today.
Yes.
We just want to thank you for joining us on this journey. And if you have any questions that come up, please write us or email us, or make a comment down below.
Yeah.
And we'd love to engage with your question and maybe perhaps answer it in the next episode. So thank you for joining us today.
Okay. Bye, y'all. See you next time.
Thanks. Take care.